For those of you who are always on the go, remember mindful moments.
Bite-sized knowledge, right?
Exactly. Perfect for those mental snacks throughout the day. Narrated by AI, too.
Have you ever really stopped and thought about how the tools we use, like even just the way we read, actually shape how we think, how we see the world?
It's a huge question, right?
Yeah,
And something we probably take for granted. The influence is often subtle, but pretty profound.
definitely. Today we're getting into Marshall McLuhan's The Gutenberg Galaxy. We want to explore his ideas on how the printing press really shifted things.
Yeah, that move from a primarily oral culture to one dominated by print. It wasn't just about books appearing. It fundamentally altered, well, human consciousness.
It's fascinating because he pulls from everywhere, doesn't he? Literature, history, art.
Oh, absolutely. He weaves it all together to show how media aren't just containers for information, but forces that reshape our senses, our very being.
So our goal here is to pull out some of the core insights from McLuhan's work, which can be, let's be honest, a bit dense sometimes.
Right. We want to offer a clear lens on these ideas, maybe spark some connections for understanding our own world without getting totally bogged down.
And as we explore these shifts, it might be useful to just keep in mind the value of taking a mindful moment now and then. Just to pause, be present with these concepts.
Good point. So McLuhan's central idea, one of them anyway, is that media are extensions of our senses.
Like the book being an extension of sight, a visual way to capture speech.
Exactly. Technology allows this outering of our senses and thoughts. It puts them out there in a tangible form.
He even talks about his own book, The Gutenberg Galaxy, saying it's not really structured like a normal book.
Yeah, it's almost like he's trying to break the mold of the very medium he's analyzing, print, trying to make it less of a one-way street, maybe.
More interactive, perhaps. Interesting. So let's dig into that big shift from oral culture to visual culture.
McLuhan argues print created this intense visual self-consciousness, both for individuals and for society as a whole.
And what were the effects of that, this visual stress, as he called it?
Well, he suggests it led to sight becoming kind of isolated from the other senses, and it influenced how we organize time and space. Think linearity, uniformity, sequence, like lines on a page.
He contrasts that with, say, non-literate societies living more in a world of sound. Sound is immersive, dynamic, tells you what's happening now.
Whereas in visually dominant cultures, like Western Europe became, there's often this bias towards seeing is believing. Sound might be background noise.
So literacy doesn't just teach reading, it actually restructures our whole sensory balance.
That's the argument. It subtly changes language, sensibility. He contrasts cultures he sees as more tactile, maybe like China or India, with the visual bias of the West.
He even goes back to the ancient Greeks, suggesting pre-Socratics had a more field approach, more auditory maybe.
Right, compared to later Greek thought, which became more focused on abstract visual patterns, separating things out.
It shows how deep these media effects can run, potentially shaping even philosophy.
Then comes Gutenberg, the big invention, bringing, as McLuhan says, techniques of uniformity and repeatability.
Suddenly, text wasn't variable like handwriting. It was standardized, mass-produced.
And that changed reading itself, didn't it? Before print, reading was often done aloud. It was more communal, more sonic.
Yeah, I remember reading about that. Print gradually made reading a silent, individual act, divorcing the eye from the voice, in a way.
Think about memory, too. Oral cultures often had incredible powers of recall, epic poems memorized.
Whereas we tend to skim more now, right? Taking in information differently because print makes it so accessible. It's a different kind of engagement.
And education changed. For medieval students, writing was tied up with rhetoric, with pronunciatio, public speaking, delivery.
Print shifted that focus, perhaps more towards the visual analysis of the text itself.
Seems likely. And the initial take on the printing press. Some saw it as this amazing engine of immortality.
Making words last forever, though McLuhan hints Shakespeare might have been a bit ironic about that idea.
Yeah, that initial burst of optimism about fixing meaning forever is interesting to look back on.
Okay, how does this connect to something like individualism?
McLuhan links the specializing effect of print-breaking tasks down to the centralization of power in the Renaissance.
Ah, so moving away from the distributed power of feudalism towards the Renaissance prince, the nation state.
Exactly. Print allowed for uniform laws, administration over distances. It facilitated delegating functions, specializing roles.
He uses Shakespeare's King Lear as an example here, doesn't he?
Yes, powerfully so. Lear stripping away his functions, delegating power for supposed efficiency, but it leads to chaos and personal disintegration. A warning, perhaps.
It shows the potential human cost of that kind of specialization and abstraction.
And McLuhan connects this to the Reformation, too. The focus on individual faith and interpretation meshed well, he thought, with the kind of individual reader that print culture fostered.
It's like the technology and the cultural shifts were feeding each other.
He even makes analogies to architecture. High Gothic cathedrals with their visible structures, that transparency he compares to the scholastic demand for explicit, clear arguments.
Contrasting with the later humanist focus on visual harmony, maybe a more unified surface impression.
Exactly. It's about how the dominant way of processing information, visual and linear for print, echoes across different fields.
Let's talk about applied knowledge, typography itself.
McLuhan calls it the first mechanization of a handicraft, taking the fluid actions of a scribe and breaking them down into repeatable mechanical steps, visually arresting the process.
And this mechanization, this visual quantifying impulse, had other effects.
He argues it contributed to a growing split, especially later in the Renaissance, between number, science, and letters, the humanities language.
Seeing them as separate things rather than integrated.
Yeah, distinct ways of knowing, which actually reminds me a bit of some explorations on channels like Mindful Moments in our podcasts, that AI audiobook analysis channel, looking at how media shapes understanding.
Right, and this drive towards uniformity and quantification inherent in print.
Paved the way for things like political arithmetic, early statistics, and even philosophical ideas like the hedonistic calculus, trying to quantify subjective experience.
Okay, this next idea is really counterintuitive. McLuhan suggests the intense visual bias of print led to the emergence of the concept of the unconscious.
It seems paradoxical, right? But his thinking is that by stressing one sense, sight, and promoting this linear, fragmented way of experiencing things,
other parts of our experience, the nonlinear, the more holistic, got pushed down, below the level of conscious attention.
we're relegated to this newly conceptualized unconscious space. He contrasts the more unified sensory life of pre-literate peoples with the fragmented experience print encouraged.
So a side effect of intensifying the visual was creating its opposite, a hidden depth.
That's the intriguing argument, a kind of splitting of consciousness.
Now, not everyone just accepted these changes wholesale, right? Was there resistance?
Oh, sure. McLuhan notes, for instance, that Spanish culture had a somewhat different reaction, maybe due to its unique history with Moorish and oral influences. They perhaps saw the effects of print differently.
And what about science?
He mentions the Royal Society in England, actively trying to create a scientific prose that was plain, direct, separate from rhetoric, and what they saw as the vicious abundance of phrase, possibly amplified by print's linearity.
Trying to purify language for objective description.
And on a larger scale, print was hugely important for nationalism.
How so?
By standardizing vernacular languages, turning local dialects into mass media, it helped create a sense of shared identity over large areas and enabled central governments to manage them more effectively.
Made the nation imaginable, in a way.
But he also points out an inherent tension in print culture, a tension around freedom between the producers, the rulers who use print to control, and the consumers, the ruled, who use it to claim individual freedom.
That dynamic is still playing out today, isn't it?
Absolutely. McLuhan felt the 20th century was, in many ways, trying to break free from some of the passive, purely visual biases of the Gutenberg legacy.
Leading to big shifts in arts and sciences, trying to recapture maybe a more multisensory, simultaneous experience.
Exactly. Understanding print's impact, he believed, was key to understanding the shifts happening in the electronic age that was dawning then, and ours now.
So wrapping this up, the takeaway is that the printing press wasn't just about making cheaper books.
Not at all. It fundamentally rewired human perception, thought, society, culture, pushing us from a world balanced more towards the oral and tactile.
Towards one heavily dominated by the visual, the linear, and the individual.
It was a massive transformation, the Gutenberg Revolution.
Which really makes you think, doesn't it? How are today's digital technologies, the internet, smartphones, AI, doing something similar? Reshaping us in ways we don't even fully see yet.
Are we moving into a completely new galaxy of understanding? Building on Gutenberg, yes, but also diverging in radical new ways.
That's the big question to ponder, I think. It's constantly evolving.
It really is. Critical thinking about our media is more important than ever.
Definitely. Well, if exploring these McLuhan ideas has got you thinking, please do subscribe so you don't miss future conversations.
And share this with anyone else you think might find it interesting.
If you want to tackle the Gutenberg Galaxy itself, we'll put a link where you can find it.
But most importantly, maybe take that mindful moment to reflect on the media you use every day.
Yeah, think about how it might be influencing your own way of seeing and understanding the world around you.